Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lon, and in each episode, I and a guest will unpack a trope with an eye for world building, character development, or narrative structures. You can also join the conversation on TikTok and Instagram. For those times when the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. Okay, Matt, since we're talking about fates worse than death today, can you tell me, what is your personal writing hell?
My personal writing hell? Oh, geez. Long time ago, I would have said edits and revisions.
Okay.
I just hated being like, I wrote the thing. Can I just be done? I don't want to do this anymore. But now, I don't know. I guess the biggest problem for me is like when I know exactly where I've got to get to, but I don't have the connective tissue to get there in the story, and I kind of just sit there, and I'm trying to find a way that feels, because I don't want to force the story to go this way, but I'm like, but this is where I know we have to go, and then I'll just kind of sometimes I'll be like, let's just make something happen that gets us there. It'll be like a fast moving train.
Okay.
And I'll figure it out later if that seems forced or not.
Yes.
But yeah, like sometimes I sit there and I have to walk away from the computer. I'm like, how do I get from C to D, etc.
Yeah. My fast moving train likes to come in the form of brackets.
Yes,
or I'm like,
yes.
travel or something like that. It says something funny and then move on.
Yeah. No, I've definitely done that where I'm writing something right now where I'm using metric for measurement. So then I'll be like, oh, I'm not good with measurement anyway. Like I'm always like, oh, what is a good equivalent to, I don't know, like this many feet or whatever. But then I'm like, now I'm dealing with metric, and I'm like, okay, what do you do if you convert this to centimeters and kilometers? I'm like, okay, and what's that equivalent to? And I'm just like, great. Never mind. I'm putting this in brackets, and I'll just be like, figure out kilometers later.
Yeah. That's very telling of us Americans. We measure things in football fields and thumb widths and stuff like that. But
have definitely used football fields for yards.
Yeah. All right, Matt. So you've been on here several times. I feel like you are a fan favorite. I personally think so because you get high hits on your episodes. So that's exciting. So how about you reintroduce yourself, and tell everyone who you are and what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Matthew C. Brown, and I'm a sci-fi fantasy author. I'm currently working on a new sci-fi book. I haven't talked too much about it yet. I haven't even really talked about it with my agent. I just told him that I'm doing it because I turned in a secret book that I can't even tell you like what genre it is.
Really?
Right now.
Is it
we're trying to keep it on the DL.
Coloring me intrigued. Is it secret against your will, or are you choosing to make it secret?
I can tell you privately.
Okay.
I can't tell you on the podcast.
Okay.
But that I turned a first draft of that in, and that I was very proud of because that was the fastest I've ever wrote a first draft since before I had a kid.
How long did it take you?
Let's see. I think it's about 7 months. I think.
Wow. Okay.
About 7 months, and that's including a bunch of research that had to go into it. It was quite the time. It was wild, compared to all the these books before that. That felt like kind of like slogs and slugfests, and like times where I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't know if this is actually going to turn out to be anything. And this one I was like, oh yeah, sure, flew right by. It was
I love that.
Much fun. Yeah,
I love when that happens.
It was beautiful. It felt like when I wrote the first Velociraptor Western book, and that flew right by. It was so much fun. It was like, oh wow, it's nice to have this feeling again.
Yeah, I'm searching for that feeling. I've yet to find that again since my Alien book. So
apparently, it only comes every like four drafts or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Well, that's very, very exciting. Best of luck to you on that secret project, but also the sci-fi, because this is the first. No, your Velociraptor one is sci-fi.
Yes, yeah, it is a sci-fi. This one's a little more. This one is actually set like in real world, and I've not done that before.
Okay.
I've usually avoided it because then I get too wrapped up in like accuracy and stuff like that. And when I have stuff like cowboys and velociraptors, I think a lot of that just kind of goes out the window, and I don't really
Yeah.
worry about it too much. And this one, I'm trying a little, I'm just trying a little something different. I was feeling inspired, and I was like, well, I need to work on something while I'm waiting for feedback on the newest draft, and this is just what I was feeling. So it's been kind of nice because I haven't been too hard on myself about it. I've been kind of just trying to use it as a space to experiment a bit, try some new things, and not be too hard on myself if I get stuck.
All right. Well, I'm so happy for you. You are like, you churn stories out. And I'm so jealous of that aspect that you have. Like, since getting your agent, how many manuscripts have you handed him?
He has been given, oh geez. So there was the one that I signed with. There's one that went out, the second book that went out on submission almost a year ago. I sent him another one after that we kind of just, he read and said was good, but said that he wanted to set it aside for now so he could try something a little different. And the little thing that was a little different ended up being the most recent draft. So I've handed him 4 different things.
Okay.
Nice. And then there's a sequel to the Raptors book that he hasn't read yet, that is sitting on my hard drive waiting for a day that I'm going to finally go in there and try and give it an honest to God revision. But it was the kind of thing where it took me like 2 years to actually write it. And then when I was done, I was like, there, it's done. I'm not going to look at it anymore. I'm going to leave it in there and work on something else.
That's a great feeling. Great sense of accomplishment, even though it's just the first draft, but my gosh, it's a great feeling to be there. All right. Well, today we come together to talk about the fates worse than death trope. And I wanted to ask you, what interested you in this topic?
So we always talk about books, movies, and shows where like your favorite character dies or like a villain dies. And I mean, Game of Thrones, like all everyone ever talks about with the show is when it's like, oh, when do you think this character is going to die? Or like, man, how this, I mean, if you go look up, it's like, oh, a Game of Thrones death compilation. Like pretty much, I mean, all sorts of major characters are just dying and it hurts people. Or, even in things that don't quite as high of a body count, you have stories where TV shows where a character gets killed off, or like you watch a movie where the villain finally gets their comeuppance, and it's like, oh yeah, like I want them to suffer. But we don't always talk about ways you can torture characters that don't have to do with killing them.
Ooh, I feel like we're getting so dark, but we're writers. We got to get dark, right?
We got to get dark. It's just it's easy to kill. It's easy to kill. I mean, you might say like, oh, I care about this character a lot and it hurts to kill them. But at the same time, you're talking about, a good way to get an emotional impact out of your reader, out of your audience. Killing a favorite character or giving a villain a satisfying death is a surefire way to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. We all love seeing that. But I'm sometimes interested more in the nuanced ways you can inflict pain upon characters that makes them wish they were dead.
So when you were gathering your examples, were you looking at villains or protagonists or both?
I think the thing that first made me think of it was heroes, or just not strictly villains. I mean, there's plenty of villains that would fit the description, but I think I was thinking of like ways that like makes the reader hurt.
Okay.
And then, like if you see a writer say like, "Oh man, I've tortured my characters in this book. I can't wait to show you all," and it's like, all right, like, is it torture because are you going to hurt us because a bunch of people are dying, or is there something else going on here? Because it's really interesting when you read a book and it's like they are way worse off than they were before, and they probably wish they were dead because of this.
Oh, okay. So I prepared some as well. So let's go back and forth. Let's start with you. What's your first example?
Okay, so I tried to find a very simple example that could kind of illustrate what I'm looking for with Fates Worse Than Death. And it's not going to be one you would imagine. It is from Toy Story 2.
Okay. Okay.
So let's get a refresher. This is the one where, yeah, I mean, most people probably know, but like Woody like ends up with a bunch of other toys from his TV show, and they're going to get shipped off to Japan. Uh, Around the end of Act Two, we find out that Stinky Pete, the prospector, is the film's surprise villain. He wants to be in a museum, and he thinks that children are monsters, and he hates them. And he's like, "We're not meant to be played with. We're just going to go here and look good forever." And then at the end of the film, at the climax, Woody's friends save him, and Stinky Pete, they could have just given him a Disney death. Disney likes their villain deaths. We've seen it before, but instead, they stick him inside a little girl's flowery backpack next to a Barbie doll that has its face painted, and she's like, "Oh, you're gonna love her," and that's like his hell. That is his hell. That he is now. Not only is he being brought home to be played with, he's being brought home by a girl that likes to face paint her toys, and that's just the worst thing that could happen to him. He is no longer in his box. He's no longer in mint condition, and he's going to be just played with until until he's tossed away.
Because you can't, that's a really good example, because unless they're incinerated, they can't die. These dolls just live. They live, live, live. So to live in a hell, that is certainly worse than death for them.
Yes.
All right. I like that. That was a great one. Okay. My example, the first thing that popped into my head, I think I actually mentioned it in the email exchange when we were first going over this, was in the book All Our Wrong Todays by Elon Musk. The main character figures out how to time travel to the past. It's a fantastic sci-fi book, highly recommend. So he manages to time travel to the past, but his way to get back to the present, if I'm remembering correctly, like that machine isn't there. So he can't use the machine to get to the present. So what ends up happening to him is somebody puts him in this state of being. I can't remember if it was like magic or sci-fi, or I don't know. It's been a while since I read it. He has to experience that 300 or whatever some year jump literally in that frozen state of place. So he is time traveling. He is. It's just not an instantaneous blackout and then you reappear. You live every minute, every second of those 300. You can't die. That is just how you are.
It's like the Steve Rogers if it was worse.
Yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. So it hurt me to read that portion of the book, because I was like, I'd hate that. Like, I'm someone that has to be active and move. I have ADHD. So like the worst thing that you could tell me to do is stay put for a long period of time. So that really got to me as a reader. So anyway, your next example.
So for a more classic example and someone who's not a villain, I would say the character Prometheus from Greek myth. There's a couple different interpretations, but the general story is that Prometheus creates humans, says, "Hey, I think humans should have fire. It can be really useful." And Zeus is like, "No, don't do that." There's usually one or two reasons that Zeus is like, "Don't do it." It's either because he thinks it'll make them too powerful, or because withholding it makes the gods more prone to being worshipped. But Prometheus gives humans fire anyway, and then Zeus punishes him by chaining him to a mountain, and every day an eagle flies down to eat his liver, and that liver is regenerated because Prometheus is immortal, and he just stays that way. And I actually went looking into this because I was like, okay, that's bad enough in of itself, but there's got to be some deeper underlying meaning to this. It can't just be because it hurts to have your liver eaten. And in fact, in ancient Greek culture, the liver was considered to be, anything from like the seat of the soul to the organ of fear and bravery. And so having that like eaten out of you is an insult.
Oh, wow.
It's a terrible thing.
Greek mythology is a hotbed for things worse than death. And I suppose if you think about death being a finite state of being, right? So death relieves you of pain, of life. Then I suppose the very essence of Greek mythology being that your life doesn't end after death. It continues in the afterlife, because there's that other same cyclical idea with the guy who has to push the rock up the hill, and then after he finally reaches the top, the rock rolls back down, and he's doomed to repeat that forever. So his death isn't even a death; it's an ongoing torture.
Yeah, Sisyphus.
Yes, thank you.
And that's That's another great example because in this case, he's not really a hero like Prometheus. He's made all sorts of problems. He's been cheating death is why
Hmm.
he gets punished, which that's what makes it so interesting is kind of like you were saying, since the underworld is just the next stage and like people like can manifest in the underworld. And then it's just like, all right, like, well, like you were such a terrible person in real life. We're going
Hmm.
to make this worse for you.
Yeah.
Like you don't like you're not just going to be wading in the river. Like you're going to be like pushing this rock.
Yeah. Well, I took a Greek myth class in college, and one of the first fundamental things they covered is that it's cyclical because a lot of it was inspired by just like the sun rising, setting, right? The cyclical of
Mhm.
the moon, and how so many stories in Greek mythology have the same cyclic, like they see it as death and rebirth over and over and over.
Yes.
And so it's kind of cool to see that even the crops dying and regrowing. I thought that was really remarkable. Okay, my next example is from someone actually submitted this. So I want to
Ooh.
give Ian Young a shout out. Ian has been on the podcast before, and he contributed this. It's called Roko's Basilisk. So the idea is, and it was so dramatic. He sent me a YouTube, and the person that was saying it's like, if I tell you this, I doom you to this fate. By so
Oh,
you if you choose to listen out, so I'm kind of putting you on the hook here. I know too much. You're gonna know too much in like a matter of minutes. All
oh
our
boy.
listeners are gonna know too much. So if you don't want to doom yourself to this fate, maybe skip forward, I don't know, 5 minutes. But okay, imagine our future where we create a malevolent artificial intelligence that will be so advanced it can eventually read our minds. And so by reading our minds, it can tell who wants to stop it. So what it does is it torments those who want to stop it. By being informed of it now, we have now doomed ourselves to this torment in our future. But if we are the ones that create it, then we can save ourselves from that fate, therefore ensuring its creation and thus the doomed torture of everyone else.
Oh God.
So yeah, that's a very
Jeez.
specific circ. I know, right? So sorry,
Yeah.
everybody.
What a
Hopefully,
paradox.
but
Jeez.
there you go, paradox. What a great way. Yeah, that's a fate worse than death if you're stuck in that paradox. So anyway, there's that. Thank you, Ian, for sharing that. The video you
Thanks a
sent me was
bunch.
creepy.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
You're like, thanks for nothing, Ian. All right. Do you have any more?
I do have another. I'm trying to decide if I want to say it now or save it for because some of these could apply to
Oh,
later on in our discussion, but I'm trying to decide if I want to do that now.
okay.
Maybe I'll hold on to it. Maybe I'll hold on to it.
Okay. I have one more that
Yeah.
inspired me off of the one that Ian sent me. This one I've been kind of thinking about. It's about our fate worse than death if we are talking about the fate of our public persona that will live on beyond us. So think Marilyn Monroe and Elvis, right? Their reputations continue after they've died. All right. So we know that smartphones have been secretly recording us for decades, likely, right? I mean, technology is just getting better and better. And they claim that they're not, but then, you keep getting those weird ads that, address the very thing you were talking about 10 minutes ago, right? So my thought is our AI, talking about malevolent AI, will be used to recreate everything that it's been overhearing for those past decades and playing it out through manifested movies or shows or TVs. You know what I mean? It's like they create images based off of what it's heard you doing. This is going to expose crimes. It's going to expose secrets. So that person, like if you're listening, if you're that person who, I don't know, buried something in your backyard that you shouldn't have, well, maybe your phone heard it, and now 10 years later, it's going to get exposed when AI suddenly starts using all of that backlog to create new content. And this could happen while I don't know how fast AI is. It could happen during our lifetime or past our lifetime. But let's say that you were a politician or a really well-known celebrity, public figure, a social media influencer, and you've passed, and then suddenly that truth comes out. Your fate is tarnished beyond your life. So you might not care, but your reputation suffers.
You mentioned that, and this actually might be a good time to slip in this particular example. I'm going back to Pixar.
Okay.
Uh, I think that you could. So this is kind of combining. This is going back to the also to the like life after death thing. But like if you take the film Coco,
Mhm.
where the concept is like, oh, like dying isn't really the bad part, but the bad part is that if you're forgotten in the real world, and
Oh
then like
yeah.
your spirit, you've have you watched it?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You do.
And like, and then you have I forget his name, but he's like the really famous singer
Yeah.
that
I forgot his name too, but you know what you're talking
yeah,
about. Yeah.
yeah, and the fact that like, and this is like another case of like a villain getting his comeuppance, is that when it's revealed that he stole the music and that he didn't write it, and
Mhm.
then everyone instead remembers the grandfather who wrote everything, and he's just kind of like kicked to the curb. It's like, great, now you're going to fade away to nothing.
Yep.
And it's like, that's kind of a way of like, yeah, like, and now your legacy is ruined, and you get to
Mhm.
watch it all from beyond the grave.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's such a great movie. I love that. Yeah, that's a really good parallel. Okay, jumping into our analysis then. From a writer's perspective and a storytelling perspective in general, how does the fate worse than death trope differ from any other forms of suffering in fiction, and why does it stand out as a storytelling device?
I think it's because there's uh, obviously death has a sense of finality to it.
Mhm.
I mean, I know we talked about the underworld and stuff, but there are also, if you have cases where that's not true, there can be times where if a story ends with uh, a character suffering a fate worse than death, and like the fact that that's the finality, and it's like that's it, that's the rest of your life. Just being like if you think about kind of like going back to Toy Story 2. And like, not obviously we talked about Stinky Pete, but then uh there's also Woody's kind of character arc, in that he like kind of stares down the barrel of a fate worse than death when he gets his arm ripped and he's put up on a shelf, and he has to contend with the truth that Andy's going to grow up one day and stop
Mm,
playing with him. And
yeah.
he's trying, it's like, all right, do I just sit here as a broken toy on the shelf? um and I think that when you have, uh, especially with heroes, they're usually enduring some kind of hardship or suffering during the story, and that's expected. But
Mhm.
I think it's different when their story ends with some kind of suffering that ties into their character arc, or some kind of poetic suffering like Prometheus or Sisyphus, uh, that isn't quite the same as if they just up and died, if they were just up and killed.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It's like a further sense of foreboding, opposite of the finality. Part of me, the finality of death. Part of me also wonders too if it kind of forces the reader or viewer to like examine their own fears, because you can children, for example, like when they discover death, right? It's a very fearful experience, and then you live out the rest of your life kind of knowing something's coming, waiting for you at the end of that tunnel, and you just kind of live your life the best you can until you reach it. But the reminder that there's something worse than death, and many times it's related to like how you live, it's a good opportunity for the viewer and reader to maybe re-examine their own personal viewpoints, and maybe, I don't know, change what they're currently doing, or realize how much power they have to like make it so they don't have such a terrible, I don't know, this is me kind of speculating at this point, but you know what I mean.
No, it's true, because there is sometimes this idea placed on death being the worst thing that can happen to someone, but um, when you think about some of the other stuff people go through in life, like that's not always necessarily the case. I mean, if you had someone that was very, very sick, I mean, like how they talk about oh, what is it? Uh like uh, like voluntary suicide or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and like just being like, yeah, like I don't want this anymore. Like this,
Right.
like what I'm doing right now is worse than if I was just up
Yeah.
and dead.
Well, and I can actually speak to that personally. When I still have bits of it, and that's why I tend to fidget a lot, because I'm constantly trying to like soothe it. But like I had the nerve pain, right, in my neck and shoulder. And when it was really, really, really bad, and I felt like that was all my life was, so I would have the thoughts of death would at least stop this. I didn't want to I wasn't going to do that, right? It wasn't like that at all. But it was more along the lines like suddenly your mindset kind of realizes it's like, oh, but it'd be like a nap. It'll be,
Right. No. but like that's what chronic pain does. Is like I
Mhm.
don't think you like I don't think we think about it that way all the time, especially like if you've never really had to deal with that
Yeah.
before. It's like it's one thing to be like, oh, like my foot hurts for a few
Right.
days, and then or like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm sore because I don't know, like bent my wrist the wrong way. But if you have a condition and you're like just carrying that around all the time, like it doesn't even need to be an excruciating 10 out of 10 pain, but the mental load every single day, like it wears on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that certain genres make better use of this trope, or do you think that you could apply it across all the tropes? Or I'm sorry, apply this trope across all the genres?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot more flexibility in stuff like sci-fi and fantasy because you can play around with different like advanced technologies, or if you want, if there's magic in your universe, and you can do all sorts of things to make things terrible for people. But I do think you can use it in any genre. And one I would select would be the thriller Gone Girl,
Okay. Okay. Tell me
because
more.
in this case you have our two leads, Amy and Nick, and kind of at both points in the film they're facing down like really dangerous situations. Nick is like, well, like if I'm found guilty, I'm probably going to get the death penalty. And then Amy sort of like finds herself uh, uh, basically finds herself prisoner at one point with, I can't remember his name, but the Neil Patrick Harris character.
Hmm.
And then like they're both kind of stuck. And when they finally get back together, uh, it's like, okay, well, now it's like we're not done yet, because now we have like, well, Nick knows that Amy tried to frame him and essentially kill him, and Amy knows that he knows, and at the end, she's pregnant, and it forces them both to be together, like in a terrible marriage where they both hate each other and both did terrible things to each other. And it's just like at that point I'm wondering, like, is Nick like, man, like I actually might have been better off just going to prison and then waiting on death row because this is awful.
Yeah. No, I love that you chose a grounded, realistic, genre to start with to show that this could absolutely translate. Because I feel like it is so easy to use science fiction or fantasy to, like, the mythologies and time travel, for example, as really easy examples. But when you used Gone Girl, it just kind of puts it into real life. Really, there are people out there that might feel, oh yeah, I can relate to this situation. I'm in a situation I don't really want to be in. I feel obligated to, and now I'm like doomed to live this lifestyle because of circumstances. So I like that you use that as your example. Was that one of the ones that you were kind of keeping in your back pocket, or is it
No, I
another
had
one?
that. No, I was saving that specifically for this part.
Okay.
As soon as I was like, oh, like I need something that's not just fantasy. I was like, Gone Girl, like
Hmm.
that's a terrible ending for two people.
There's a one that's in the thriller. So thriller is, I guess, a really good place to land then when it comes to like realistic fiction. I've talked about it before. It's called Perfect Days. I think it's Raphael. I forgot his last name in the moment, but it's a horror. It's written from the perspective of a psychopath, and what he does is he kidnaps this woman, and to him it's a love story, every beat of a traditional love story, but it's kind of got a limited first person perspective, so you can only tell what she's thinking by how he's perceiving it, and you have to read between the lines to really understand the horror of it. And at the end, and plug your ears or skip forward 30 seconds. At the end, she almost makes it out. Like but at this point, he's crippled her. He's done all these things. She almost makes it out, but he crashes the car that they're in. Like, you're so close to escape. She wakes up in the hospital with zero memory, and he shows up and he pretends to be the kind boyfriend. The family comes to visit, believes him. She's like, I don't know who you are, but I guess okay. And so now they live a life together. They have family, and she has zero memory of what happened. She's in a wheelchair because of what he did to her. And every now and then she has these dreams, and she has nightmares, and she doesn't understand them. And I think the last paragraph was like, he rocks her. He comforts her when she wakes up from those nightmares. She has no idea what actually happened. It's like, oh my
Yeah, I think I remember you talked about this a
God.
while back on one of your previous podcasts. And I remember hearing that and being like, holy crap, that's like a man, what a gut punch of an ending. Yeah, that absolutely is one, especially I love the idea making it, I think having it be a first person limited perspective really just because it wouldn't be quite the same.
Hmm.
Like I'm just like not having read it. Like I'm just picturing the whole idea that she has to come out of this daze and wake up in the bed and be like, I don't know anyone here, and like reading it and like slowly realizing like, this is
Yeah.
the guy. Like red alert, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's terrifying.
yeah.
Okay. So then speaking of, we started getting into characters a bit here, but what makes this specific trope decision meaningful for a character's arc?
I think it depends on the character because it often like will cycle back onto a specific character, like a certain part of the story or uh, certain morals and themes that might play into that. Um, kind of like going back to like Sisyphus is like if you're like when you're dealing with the afterlife and death is not a bad thing, and then you have the fact that he's a trickster character and he's been cheating death all this time, and it's like, well, like your punishment, like for doing all this, it's like, oh, you tried so hard, you thought you were above the gods,
Hmm.
like because you were dealing with this, so now you're going to be pushing this boulder to the top, and like you think you're going to get to the top, like you think you're going to finally achieve being on top of everything. Nope, nope, you don't get to have that.
It's a
But
justice system.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, for a more specific character arc, I'm about to talk Star Wars.
Oh, we did
Okay, we did it. Yes,
it.
this is going to happen.
The ongoing timeline.
Um,
You were the first one this time.
yes. So Anakin Skywalker.
Okay.
I know spoiler, he does eventually end up dying, but if you think about his what really is like his first character arc, that of the prequels, I mean, the whole thing is that he wants to protect Padme, he wants to protect his unborn child, and the way that ends up happening is he ends up falling to the dark side as a way of trying, and that ends up being his downfall because he ends up being defeated by Obi-Wan. He is left to die. He's got third degree burns over his body, and then he's just encased in this armor.
Oh,
And on top of all that, he finds out that his wife is dead, the very person he was trying to save by doing this terrible thing in the first place.
do you think he would
And
have killed himself if he could, or do you think the suit's keeping him alive, creating the fate worse than death?
I mean, I think that it was, I don't know, it just doesn't seem the type to do that.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get this.
Yeah.
Okay. I just need to mute it and I'll make note of this and I'll take it out. All right, carry on.
No
I'm sorry.
problem.
Go ahead.
But just I don't know. I feel like in that case, it's almost like by that point he's kind of killed the character of Anakin, and it's just, or it might even be that just to make himself feel alive, he has to suffer and just
Okay.
let himself feel the suffering. Uh, and yeah, and that's just the fact that it's like what is worse than trying to save the one you love by basically forsaking yourself and your character, causing the death of all these people, and at the end of it, it doesn't even matter.
Ooh, there's like an existentialism to it. Like, what's the point? Yeah, that's interesting. Because now unpacking that story and me thinking like, why even carry on? Do you think were there any cases of suicide in Star Wars where someone like, is there a reason why that didn't happen?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of any. I mean, I guess if you want to think, I mean, this isn't really suicide, but like Ben Solo sacrificing himself to save Rey isn't quite the
Oh,
same. But that's not quite the same. That's a sacrifice. But as far as like
okay,
suicide, I'm not sure I can
okay.
think of any off the top of my head.
Is it
I mean,
possible
there
to
might be
even
out
do it
there.
with the Force? Because I feel like at least okay, we're now in that weird line between like the world building and just the writing, right? When
Right,
it's like
right.
and milking a series and but like, is it possible to ever actually? Is it always going to be a fate worse than death essentially with the Force? Do you ever fully find your end in death?
Right. And especially since if you're talking about, we talk about the idea of like people living on in the force afterwards, but then it's like, okay, but does that uh then but even then it's like, all right, like I gotta exist and like watch all these things happen to the people that I
Yeah.
care about.
Well, I heard a rumor. I don't know if like they're doing another thing with Rey.
Yeah, they're supposed to be doing something set sometime afterward with her trying to rebuild the Jedi Order, is my
Okay.
understanding of it. I don't know how far along that is, or like what it's gonna look like really,
Okay.
but I know that they were doing that.
Then of course the speculations began. Do you think that you're gonna try to use this to bring back Kylo Ren?
I hope not, kind of. It's just because that would just seem way too. I mean, it would be one thing if they want to have him be a Force ghost, like, sure, why not? Go ahead and do that. If they want to do flashbacks, I mean, I would be totally. I mean, I think it'd be cool if they did an animated series of Star Wars what ifs,
Okay.
kind of like they
Okay.
did with Marvel. And if they want to do like, oh, like what if Ben hadn't died? If they want to do that to get their kicks, like I'm game. But I kind of hope they don't. I mean, and I hope they don't kind of do that because
I mean, from a writer's perspective, you just keep bringing your characters back. They never die. They keep getting reborn. They keep coming back in some way to endure some new torture, like
right.
Sisyphus, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I mean, of the many genres that have done that, like, I don't think Star Wars has really done too much with that. I mean, I know, I mean, Force Ghost is one thing, but then to completely bring a character back from the dead to be like, hey, like, I'm here again now because I'm so cool.
Oh, yeah. I imagine, I mean, I already know the Star Wars fan base is rough, but I imagine that there would be quite some reaction if they were to choose to go in that direction.
That's a very gentle way of putting it.
Yeah. I'm good at being diplomatic. All
Yeah.
right. All right. In the fates worse than death circumstance, which is more distressing, do you think, for the readers and watchers? Is it the pain that they endure, like getting your liver eaten out, or is it the loss of autonomy, like the time traveler stuck in one place for 300 years?
I mean, I'm gonna say autonomy personally. I
Okay.
mean, like pain is one thing. I mean, pain is bad. But I think uh like that's just a very one-sided thing. Um and but I think there's just a greater sense of horror attached to losing your bodily autonomy,
Hmm.
or mentally. There's a book and a film called Johnny Got His Gun, and you might know of it. It's famous. It was made famous by Metallica. Really, it was the inspiration for their song "One," and they used clips from the movie in their music video.
Okay.
I think they actually bought the rights to the movie, so they didn't have to keep paying royalties. But anyway, so this book slash movie, it was written and directed by Dalton Trumbo, and it's about a soldier in World War One who is hit by an artillery shell and he survives. He wakes up in a hospital and slowly realizes that he has no arms, no legs, no face, so he has no sight, no hearing, no speech, and he's basically just a prisoner being kept alive in his own body.
Oh, wow.
And he's being kept alive because and his mind is still working fine somehow, but like he can't do anything, he can't communicate, and he learns to communicate by basically slamming his head against a pillow for Morse code, and he's basically like, kill me.
Oh.
And the US Army is like, no, that's against regulations. And so then at the end, I don't remember if it's the book and the film. In one of them, there's a nurse that takes pity on him and tries to he is using Morse code, and she tries to hold down his breathing tube. And you think that, oh, he's gonna get his death, and then they find the nurse and take her away, and he's just forced to basically live out the rest of his life as just a torso
Wow.
with none of the senses. It's a pretty brutal anti-war story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Because you're right. Like when you relate pain or loss of autonomy, to have pain inflicted on you against your consent, that is a loss of autonomy.
Hmm.
I see it kind of collectively falling within that bucket. Um, if you could face one of these fates worse than death in fiction, which would it be and why?
So there is a. Have you seen a movie called Upgrade?
Is that the one with Keanu
It's like
Reeves?
no, not
No.
Keanu Reeves. It's like it's Logan Marshall Green, who was
Okay.
on the OC,
Oh, okay.
among other things. Anyway,
Maybe I might have, I might not have. I don't know. Let's
yeah,
hear it.
it's a cyberpunky thriller
Okay.
film. It's really really good. I love this movie, and I'm about to spoil it. So anybody who doesn't want to hear, plug your ears now. But even if you do hear it, please go watch it anyway because it's awesome. But anyway, so in the movie, it's about this guy named Gray, and they're in kind of like a not too far distant future. It's like 2050 or something like that. And this is
Mhm.
like when like a lot more tech is starting to come about, self-driving cars and whatnot. And he and his wife get mugged, and she's murdered, and he's left as a quadriplegic.
Oh, wow.
And he's offered by this tech whiz an implant called STEM that basically will help him. This implant can take control of a human's motor functions. So he's implanted, and in effect, he becomes able to use his arms and legs again. And not only that, but uh, he can actually have STEM take full control of his body, and he turns into like a martial arts machine and can like kill uh, while searching for his wife's killers. And at the
Wow.
end of the movie, we find out that STEM has basically been orchestrating all this so that it can become human. Um,
Oh.
and 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 so Gray tries to kill himself, and he shoots himself in the head. He wakes up. He's in a hospital bed. He's not paralyzed. His wife comes in to see him. They hug each other, and then the camera zooms out, and you see this dead face Gray. STEM has taken control of him in body and mind, and so he's just left in the matrix, basically.
So wait, so STEM is like a parasite living off of
It's like
everyone?
it's almost like a parasite because he's like a host, but
Yeah.
it's like an AI kind of thing.
Now I
And
do
he
want to
and
watch
it
this.
like and it can and it talk and it like talks to him the whole movie. It's like, oh, we have to go here, we have to do this, like it's his friend. It's also important to note that the character is a technophobe, so for him to allow this implant in order to find his wife's killers is a big
Oh.
deal. And then he ends up basically just being trapped inside his own head in like his ideal situation. It's like, oh, everything was fine after all. But in the real world, he is now just a vessel for this efficient killing machine. But like for me, it's like, well, like I'm back with my wife and I'm just chilling out and I'm all healthy again. Like it's not really bad for me. It's bad for everyone else.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah.
Well, isn't Elon Musk working on a chip Neuralink right
Oh,
now?
probably.
Yeah, I think yeah, he is. He's working on something called Neuralink, and I think I don't know if you can actually get it implanted now, but I think the goal is that you could. So, cautionary tale, this movie presents kind of like, what exactly are you putting in there, on behalf of a corporation, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't let
Ooh.
them do that.
So, could you face that one if you had to
I'm
face
just, I
one?
mean, it's like for me, it's like I'm ignorant of it all. Like I have like that's kind of like that's one of those things where like the ignorance is bliss. And it's like I don't know that I'm trapped inside my own head.
Yeah.
It's bad for everybody else, but I'm good.
Yeah.
I think I'm good anyway.
Okay.
I don't know how far that illusion spreads if he like actually gets to like if it's a little bit like Inception where he can just kind of live out this life inside his own dream,
Yeah.
but it's just like, hey, like nothing's bad here.
Okay. What I think I'd be able to tolerate is an example that I haven't shared yet, but was planning to. It is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E.
Oh,
Schwab.
I love that book.
So it's such a good book. I read it during the pandemic and it was really good. Okay, so in this one, it's about a girl that's trying to escape her life circumstances. She makes a deal with the devil, basically, and she can live her life forever, like she lives immortally, but no one can remember her after that they've walked away or had finished their encounter with her. And so she gets to live her life of freedom, but there's a huge cost to it. And she learns to value connection. And so the point of the book is that she meets someone else who actually does remember her after their first encounter. And oh God, it's such a good book. I need to reread it now just thinking about it. But I'm kind of like, I wouldn't mind. I'm probably in the first throes of like, it's not so bad. I need a break. Like, like I've adulted and peopled enough, and I could do with like maybe, assuming I get to finish out what I'm doing now. Like I love where I am now, but if it meant living longer, maybe I can handle it. There are downsides, of course, to living forever, and some of our my followers on social media did submit some thoughts on what they thought would be a fate worse than death, and one of them was living forever, because I can imagine that you would then be witness to so many terrible things that we really should only be experiencing in our own lifetime, but now make that even longer. Now you're going to see Third World War. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like in the movie Highlander, where they're all cursed to
Mhm.
live forever, and the reward is that you become mortal at the end.
Yes.
And you do see pain like that, where it's like, oh, like you fall in love with people, and they die, and they get older, and you don't.
Hmm.
And yeah, and with Addie LaRue, and you were talking about how like, oh, some of it isn't so bad, and like it is funny because you see a lot of moments in the book where, especially when it's the present day scenes, because by that time she's just it's been a couple hundred years, and
Hmm.
like she's gotten used to it, and she knows the ins and outs of it, and like knows like how to take advantage of it, and like she's not even that tortured by it anymore. Like it still bothers her, obviously, but it's kind of like numb.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's kind of like numb, but like otherwise she's like, oh yeah, like slept with this guy again. I can't remember. It's like our 14th one night
That's our
stand. Like,
14th one
but
night
whatever.
stand.
But whatever. It's like the fact that so that's why it's so interesting, because it's like at the start of the book she's already had this fate worse than death placed upon her.
Hmm.
Um, and then the whole rest of the book is just like the idea of like, oh, what if there's like a reprieve? It's like
Yeah.
that moment, like that light in the darkness of like, oh, like maybe this eternity like has an actual upside.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, I have some listener questions for you.
Yes.
All right. How culturally influenced are the ideas of what constitutes fates worse than death? So how does culture play a role?
I mean, I think it can be a big role, especially. I mean, if you're talking, I mean, obviously, like we talked about Greece, and I
Hmm.
mentioned stuff like, oh, like with Prometheus and the liver being eaten, and why that was particularly significant in Greece. But if you're also talking about other religions with ideas of the afterlife, I mean, it's kind of like if you talk about, uh, Christian ideology. It's like, oh, like the bad part about dying isn't dying; it's the fact that you could be in hell.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like we want to be free of eternal damnation. Like so, but like for other cultures that like, or for other religions, like if you don't believe in hell, it's like, well, then that's not a problem for me. Like I don't care. So like that definitely plays a big part.
Okay. Um, well, this kind of bleeds into the next question, which is, does a person's ideas of fate's worse than death influenced by their ideas of the afterlife, which you touched on already with its cultural significance. Anything else you want to add to that, or do you feel like you got that?
I mean, that just kind of ties back into the idea of a fate worse than death being particularly impactful when it's specific to that person, that character, and what they believe or what their end goal is. Because obviously, if you it's kind of like if you have a certain belief in something that means something to you, and then you're kind of like if you have the idea of like something like if you have like I just thought of this like the Spanish Inquisition, and it's like, oh, we're trying to make people confess their sins and renounce their faith. And for some people, the idea of renouncing their faith is worse than being burnt at the stake.
Mm-hmm.
And they would rather die a terrible death than forsake who they are.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. And also, in answer to this question, if death is your goal, right? You talk about the military man that was suffering and wanted to die but couldn't, then his idea of a fate worse than death is to live in
Yes.
those conditions. So, all right. I think okay. So other contributions from listeners was just to tell us what they thought was a fate worse than death.
Hmm.
So one was having to relive your worst day ever
Ugh.
over and over and over and over. So time loops is definitely which is going to be an episode that we're going to do in the near future. And then another one said being forced to listen to Mariah Carey's Christmas music on loop.
And I work at a grocery store, so I already know what that's
Yeah,
like.
you know that. All right, Matt. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Any final remarks?
I mean, not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, I think we kind of covered it. It's been a lot of fun getting to chat about this. This was kind of on like I had to dig through my list of like, I know I had topic ideas from the last like two times we did this.
Yeah.
It was like, but then I was like, but I never wrote down any of my actual ideas. So I had to go through some of that and do this over again. But this is great.
Yeah, awesome. Anything you'd like to promote at this time?
I do have a short story that is part of a published anthology called Whispers in the Earth, World Folklore Reimagined. It was all put together by Gabriella Houston, and it's a collection of folklore stories. I wrote a story for it called Bonaparte's Devil, which is about the Jersey Devil. It was a very, very different one for me. But that was a Kickstarter earlier in the year. I think ebooks just went out for it, and sometime later it'll probably be up on Amazon. But just yeah, if that's your jam, keep an eye out for that.
All right, exciting. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for joining me today. I really enjoy having this discussion with you. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.